Invincible doesn't hold back when it comes to violence, making it one of the most shockingly brutal animated shows ever. The deaths in the series are not just gory, they are crafted to make the audience feel the pain and hopelessness of each character's demise. As the series continues, we can only expect the brutality to escalate even further. The show is packed with brutal fights and gruesome deaths that leave viewers in shock. From civilians to superheroes, no one is safe. In this breakdown, we'll go through some of the most painful deaths in Invincible, analyzing the brutality and sheer horror of each one. The Guardians of the Globe Massacre. The series wastes no time showing its viewers just how brutal it can be. In the very first episode, Omni-Man single-handedly massacres the Guardians of the Globe. Each death is uniquely horrifying. Darkwing. Omni-Man grabs Darkwing midair and slams him down with such force that his spine audibly snaps. Paralyzed and unable to move, Darkwing watches helplessly as Omni-Man picks him up again and slams his head into the ground, reducing his skull to a bloody mess. His cape, meant to help him glide, ironically ends up draping over his broken body like a burial shroud. Red Rush. As a speedster, Red Rush experiences time at a much slower rate than others, meaning he feels every agonizing moment as Omni-Man slowly crushes his skull. His desperate punches barely faze his attacker as his head caves in, eyes bulging, blood pouring from his nose and mouth before his skull finally gives way like a crushed can. War Woman. Omni-Man intercepts her powerful strike and counters with a devastating punch to her head. The sheer force of the hit instantly fractures her skull, and before she can react, her neck snaps with a sickening crunch. Her body crumples, lifeless, her once indomitable strength rendered meaningless in an instant. Green Ghost. Attempting to phase through Omni-Man's attack, Green Ghost miscalculates, leaving her vulnerable. Omni-Man's fist crashes through her face as if she were a delicate piece of glass. Her own helmet becomes her coffin, as her skull is reduced to pulp inside it. The wet, crunching sound echoes through the battlefield, making her death particularly gruesome. Martian Man. Omni-Man overpowers him effortlessly, gripping his head with both hands and slowly applying pressure. Martian Man's elastic physiology allows his skull to stretch, making his death even more horrifying as his bulging eyes look on in terror before his head explodes like a popped balloon, splattering his remains across the battlefield. The Immortal. Despite his name, he is anything but invincible against Omni-Man. After being disemboweled with a punch straight through the chest, he fights on, showing resilience. However, Omni-Man ends it by gripping his head and tearing it clean off his shoulders. His decapitated body spasms for a few moments before falling limp, his legacy erased in seconds. Aquinas. The King of the Seas stands no chance as Omni-Man grabs his head and slams it down with immense force. His fish-like skull caves in, his brain matter exposed in a sickening display. His gills flutter in one last, desperate attempt to breathe, before his body twitches and goes still in a pool of his own blood. 2. Donald Ferguson's Sacrifice. One of the most heartbreaking deaths in the series is Donald's. When Omni-Man attacks the GDA facility, Donald courageously tries to stop him. Despite his best efforts, he's incinerated in a fiery explosion. What makes his death even more tragic is his realization that he is going to die, followed by a painful scream as the fire consumes him. The heat melts his skin before he can even finish his final thoughts. 3. The Massacre of Flaxen Civilians. When Invincible fights the Flaxens, they suffer an excruciating fate. After Omni-Man travels to their dimension, he obliterates their entire civilization. He kills them in the most gruesome ways possible, ripping them apart, crushing them with buildings, and leaving their world in complete devastation. The screams of Flaxen children and families can be heard as he ensures their extinction. 4. Omni-Man vs. Invincible Chicago Massacre. This is arguably the most horrifying moment in the show. When Mark refuses to join his father, Omni-Man punishes him by proving how little human life means. Train scene. Omni-Man grabs Mark and forces him through a moving train, using his body as a human weapon. The sheer destruction is horrific, with people getting torn apart as Mark helplessly experiences the devastation firsthand. Their faces explode as they collide with his unbreakable body. City-wide destruction. Omni-Man hurls Mark into buildings, causing them to collapse, killing thousands of people in the most horrifying ways. Some are crushed, others burned alive. The final beating. Omni-Man brutally beats his son to a pulp, knocking his teeth out and leaving him nearly unrecognizable before leaving Earth in tears. Blood covers the landscape where they fought. 5. The execution of Battle Beast's victims. During a brutal battle, Battle Beast proves he is one of the most terrifying villains. He mercilessly crushes heroes like Black Samson and Monster Girl, leaving them in near-death states. But the most horrifying fates belong to Bulletproof, ripped apart brutally with no mercy. His internal organs spill onto the ground. Terror's victims,